Hello and welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today I have a video I've been looking forward to getting done for quite a while. I have a comparison of the M16A4 and the German G36. Now, of course, these are civilian versions, and I'll get into that, as well as the historical background of both of these rifles, and then a point-by-point comparison of the two. Anyway, if that all sounds interesting to you, please stick around. That's coming up now. Okay guys, so jumping into this, there's basically three things I'm going to cover in this video. First, I want to talk about exactly what it is I have here. As I just mentioned, these are civilian counterparts to the military M16A4 and the German G36. So we're going to talk about what those are. Second, I want to get into the history of the battle rifles, the assault rifles themselves as we get into this. Where do they start from? Where are they now? So we're going to go through that, kind of an abridged history of the two. And then third, we're going to do a point-by-point comparison starting at the muzzle, ending at the buttstock of the two rifles. So if you are interested in the historical context of how they compare with one another, there's that. And then B, if you are interested in purchasing one of these civilian variants, you can kind of get an idea of what the differences are between them if maybe you want one or both. So let's go ahead and get into that. So starting off here at the top, this is actually an FN collector series, the FN15 or the M16A4 collector series. So basically this is a civilian legal semi-automatic only version of the M16A4 that's made by FN for the civilian market. Now these retail in about the $1,500 to $1,700 price point. You do have a perfect scale copy of the rifle. Of course, FN holds the large contract for the military M16A4s. They're made exactly pretty much to scale everything down to the UID code and the FN logos, and I'll show you that as we get into the comparison. The Knight's Armament RAS system, so a very, very close representation of that. And down here, this is a Tommy built T36 ES. 100% made by Tom Bostick of Tommy built. There are a few authentic surplus G36 parts in here, but by and large, all of the components, the receiver halves and everything are new production. So you can get that from Tom Bostick. There are a couple other retailers such as Atlantic Firearms, and I know Brownells carries them now, that you can get them. They're selling them on their sites and on Gunbroker. I got this one directly from Tom, so he was really easy, really helpful to work with. So I've been really happy to get this rifle, and he is pretty much the only manufacturer of these rifles. He does this pretty much by himself. He makes the parts, he puts them together. The quality is excellent. He doesn't come out with huge production numbers, so that kind of creates two issues. One is supply, so you do have to be patient and get them when they're in stock. B is the price, so this thing is going to retail at around $2,800, $2,900, so you really have to want one if you want to get into it. The only other way you're going to get into a domestic US G36 is if you get a conversion, which Tom Bostick also does. You can get an HK SL8, which on the used market is going to run you about $1,500 to $2,000. You can send it to Tom Bostick. He will do the complete conversion if you want those HK roll markings and stuff. But again, he's going to charge you about, I think it's about $1,500 for the conversion. So again, there you're going to be at between $3,000 and $4,000 for a converted SL8. So either way you go, it's going to be very, very expensive. Those are your only options if you want to get into a G36. Okay, so now we know what exactly it is that we have and what we're talking about. Let's go ahead and sort of pretend like we're looking here at the military counterparts of these, which is really only going to be different based on the fire control groups, among some slight other differences, which I'll get into in this comparison. But let's go ahead and jump into the history to give us some context here. So let's go ahead and start with the M16A4. So the history here starts in the 1960s. I have it's about an hour and a half long video on the early development and implementation of the M16, the early X16E1, the 603s, the 604s into the type classified M16A1. Very heavily sort of discussed in that video, which I will leave a link to down in the description as well as at the end of this video. So if you want to know about the development of the M16, please go check out that video. So throughout the 60s and 70s, we have the use of the M16A1. Everybody knows it's the iconic triangular handguards, the pencil profile barrel, 1 in 12 twist, uses the standard 20 round magazine, of course chambered in 5.56 by 45. Fully automatic, capable. It's a little bit of a shorter shoulder stock. basically everybody knows the iconic M16A1. Now, in 1982, at the behest of the Marine Corps wanting to bring the M16 sort of into the more modern age, giving a little bit more accuracy and precision, we come up with the development of the M16A2, which again is a fixed carry handle. It has your adjustment, your windage and elevation settings on the rear of the firearm, giving the shooter a little bit more control over the precision of the rifle right at the back of the rifle without having to change anything up the front with the front sight post or anything like that. No use of a tool anymore or a bullet tip. We've changed the profile of the barrel to be a little bit thicker. We've moved to the ribbed A2 style handguards. The shoulder stock has been lengthened a little bit. You go to the A2 profile pistol grip, which you have here. It has a little notch here. The A1 did not. And more importantly, we move from the full automatic capabilities of the A1 to the semi-safe and burst selector of the M16A2. Now, we also have the development of the A3, which never gets a lot of press because it is essentially the exact same as the A2 externally. All the same features and changes, except it moved back to the M16A1 fire control group, which is safe, semi, and full auto, which the A2, of course, was a burst. The A3 was used in very limited circumstances, some special force operations, stuff like that. By and large, not widely manufactured and issued. The A2 would stay king within the United States military from the early 80s all the way up to about the mid 1990s, where we have the new development of the more further modified M16A4, which would then be adopted by the Marine Corps in 1997. So we have a couple other revisions that are made. Again, we stay with the safe, semi, and burst fire control group. We now have a detachable carry handle on the top. If you remove it, you're exposing a section of 1913 rail. Typically what you're going to find is a sort of a ModTech rear sight, again adjustable at the back, very simple and intuitive to use, but then it's issued with an ACOG. You have the Knight's Armament M5 RAS system, vertical grip, pretty standard. You could remove that, you could put lights, lasers. Again, railed sections is pretty much what's where the world is heading in the 90s and 2000s. Most of your other features are remaining the same. Again, we're staying with the safe, semi, and burst configuration, A2 pistol grip, A2 buttstock. That's basically it. So it's a modernized and revamped version of the M16A2, if you will. So again, if you consider the fact that the M16 platform has remained in service from about the early 60s up until about 2015. What happens in 2015? Well, we have the use in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're seeing a lot of close-in contact sort of engagements in villages, room-to-room, home-to-home clearing, that sort of thing. So the Marine Corps would make the M4 carbine standard issue, moving the M16A4 to more of an ancillary type of support role, which actually the roles were reversed. The M14 was more in the support role up until, or I'm sorry, M14, the M4 was more of a support role up until that point. Okay, so let's go ahead and move down to the development of the German G36. Okay, so the important time frame here is really between 1997 and 2015, but let's back up a little bit first and look at what's happening in the 1970s. So at that time, Germany is still issuing the G3 to the Bundeswehr. It is a 7.62 by 51mm NATO cartridge, a full battle rifle, which at the time, most of the world, especially all the NATO countries, has moved into an intermediate cartridge. You have the United States with the 5.56, Austria developing the AUG, Australia following suit with that project. You have most of the comm bloc countries going to the 7.62 by 39. So by the 70s, to still be using a 308, Germany is a little bit behind the curve. However, at the time, HK is heavily invested in the development of the G11, and the G11 is it's probably the most iconic rifle that was never used. It was type of ammunition. It was very revolutionary, very innovative for the time. And at the time, it was looking like Germany was absolutely going to be headed into the direction of the G11. So HK abandoned any type of development of any other rifle system which would use an intermediate cartridge such as the 5.56. Now, a wrench would sort of be thrown into those cogs at about the late 80s, early 90s, when you have the unification of East and West Germany. When that happened, you have complete and total budget cuts, you have new administration and sort of arms design at the time, and the Bundeswehr basically says, hey, we're scrapping the idea of moving forward with the G11. What we want to do is follow suit with everybody else and go to a 5.56 assault rifle, select fire rifle that we can get into, you know, again, just sort of like the rest of the world without being too heavily invested in R&D in this whole new project, sort of like the G11 has been focusing on for the better part of the previous decade. So in about 1990, HK gets to work with development of what would become the HK Model 50, and this would basically be in this configuration, and sort of R&D and development of this would continue between 1990 to about 1994, 1995. Now, this would be officially adopted in 1996 by the Bundeswehr in this configuration, more or less this configuration, and I'll explain a little bit of the differences. And then 1997, like I said, that important date, that's when it is starting to get issued to the German troops in the Bundeswehr. Now, this would stay in production in Germany until about, it would start seeing problems in 2013, 2014, when there started becoming the controversial complaints about barrels overheating and loss of accuracy due to the parts overheating, ejection issues and stuff like that. What you basically see is the G36 being pushed beyond its design limits. It is basically all made of polymer, if you will, a very heavily reinforced polymer with some metal parts, mainly the trunnion and the barrel, bolt carrier group, the rest of it, everything basically being polymer, and the barrel being a very lightweight profile. Now, early in development, HK had developed the MG36, which was essentially this exact same setup, but set up for more of a sustained fire machining Gewehr, if you will, MG, for a support role. But the Bundeswehr sort of rejected it in early stages, saying, hey, it's kind of pointless having two completely different rifles, only difference being a lighter trunnion and barrel, as opposed to just issuing the same rifle to everybody. We can put it in a support role if we want to. Now, through most of the use of the G36 really did not see a lot of combat. Germany has mainly been either neutral or not engaged in any type of world military activity until Afghanistan, but sort of started the spur of all this sort of controversy. Now in 2015, the German Ministry of Defense would basically come out and say, hey, these things are not what we thought they were. They're poorly designed. They're not working well. We're going to ditch this. This came with a lawsuit against HK, which HK ended up winning. But through all of this, Germany has decided, hey, we're going to move forward with a new design with which the trials are open, with one submission from HK and another one from Heinel. So we have yet to see the outcome of that, but basically we can mark 2015 as sort of the beginning of the phasing out of the G36. 2015 is the beginning of the phasing out of the M16A4, at least as the frontline main issued assault rifle. Okay, now with the very abridged history of the two out of the way, let's go ahead and do a point-by-point comparison of the two. Let's go ahead and start off with the length. The length of the M16A4 is sitting right at about 39.5 inches, and the G36 is at about 39.25, so almost exactly the same length. Now, the G36 does have a side-folding stock, so let's do that. I'm doing this at a really weird angle. And look at its collapsed length of about 29.25 inches. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the unloaded weight of each, starting with the M16A4. And we are at 7 pounds 12 ounces. Now keep in mind, this is not entirely scientific, it's just to give you sort of a parameter. The M16A4 would typically be issued with an ACOG scope, which is going to add a little bit of weight on there. Of course, you could take the forward hand grip off and change the weight, add lights and lasers, change the weight. I do have a little pouch here in the back. I took the spare mag out, so you have an ounce or two of fabric back here in the back, but it'll give you a close approximation, 7 pounds 12 ounces. Okay, let's look at the G36. I can find a balancing point. We're at 7 pounds 4 ounces. Of course, the Bundeswehr would have used a different optic, which was a little bit heavier. They could have also used a short accessory rail with just iron sights on it. You could have mounted an optic here. This is a little bit more of a modern derivative, so you could change the weight there. Of course, adding a sling or anything else like that. So a close approximation. The G36 is going to be lighter by about 10 ounces, which does make total sense because it is mainly polymer, whereas the M16 is mainly 70-75 T6 aluminum, you know, that sort of thing. So metal is always going to be heavier than polymer. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the trigger pull weight of each. I'm starting here with the G36. We are at a weight at 7.5 pounds. And here with the M16A4. 5 pounds 1 ounce. So the trigger is considerably lighter on the M16. Let's go ahead and bring them in close for comparison. Okay, bringing this in for comparison, this is the M16. It does have a metal trigger, and I'm trying to balance the weight here on my shoulder. Single stage mil-spec trigger. Go ahead and start pulling. Basically immediately hit a wall, there's no movement. Right into a break, no movement for the reset. Reset, a little travel, right there into a reset. Excellent trigger actually overall. By comparison, here is the trigger on the G36. Definitely very long, a very wide face to it. Feels very comfortable. It is polymer. You have a little bit of movement there. There's a tiny bit of amount of take up. Go ahead and pull. Right there, definitely heavier at about 7 pounds. Show the reset. Right there, it's immediately into a reset. The minute you start letting off, it resets. Right there, again, about that 7.5 pounds. Reset right there. So the trigger on the M16 is undoubtedly a lot better. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the barrel, starting here with the M16A4. So this is a 20-inch barrel with a 1-in-7 twist. It is button broached and chrome lined, and it has the A2 style birdcage flash hider, which is vented from about the 3 to 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, from about the 3 to 9 o'clock. Down here at the 6 o'clock, it is completely closed off, so you don't get any type of dust blowing up or anything like that if you are shooting from a laying down prone position, something along those lines. You are going to notice your front sight tower, which is F marked on this particular model with the bayonet lug there. All of your gross elevation changes happen right up here at the front post. You do need a bullet tip or something to depress that little detent so you can rotate that. Okay, moving to the G36, you're going to notice a much thinner profile barrel. It is 18.9 inches. Black nitride coated. You do have a 1x15 millimeter thread pitch here at the front. Now, the one way that the Germans sort of did this is they used a set of splines on the front with a little leaf spring, if you will, on the bottom, so you could actually just turn and that'll lock, so you can thread that off under hand pressure. You don't need any type of tool, which you would actually need to change the muzzle device on an M16 variant. So very quick to switch out any type of muzzle brake, suppressor, anything you want to do up there on the front. It is a birdcage flash hider style as well, and the ports do open up around the entirety. Moving back, you're going to notice a bayonet lug here. And then as you move back into the handguard, it actually is totally free floated. They could have had a provision for a bipod down here at the bottom, this little opening. You would stick a pin. A pin I do not have. You would actually also use that as your forward sling swivel. Okay, moving back here into the handguard of the M16A4. As mentioned before, this is a nice armament M5 RAS system. These little panels can be removed, exposing full rail section on all 4 sides, and they are sort of heat shielded inside. The handguard system undoubtedly adds a little bit of weight to the overall platform compared to the M16A2 or the A1. You can put a vertical grip, lights, lasers, anything like that. You can see many pictures of those in the Marine Corps using these with all sorts of myriad different configurations. So whatever you wanted to set it up to your use, gives you a lot more usability there. Of course, front sling swivel here on the front. Around the back, you can use the back sling swivel or wrap it around sort of in this sort of Spectre configuration I have it in, which is also commonly seen in use in the military. Moving a little bit forward, you do have the receivers. Now, most people know, if you're not aware, in an M16, you do have 2 receiver halves, the upper and the lower receiver. Upper receiver, of course, being this section, the lower receiver, of course, being this section. You do have an ambidextrous fire selector here, of course, being a civilian version is only safe and semi, but they do have the auto selector sort of engraved right here just for authenticity. Again, this is a collector series. UID information, serial number, all of that information here again, just as they would issue it. The A2 pistol grip, polymer in construction. You do have a little notch here, which is an A2 configuration. 7075 T6 aircraft grade aluminum type 3 hardcoat anodized. You do have a Maytech or Mawtech rear flipping sight, but of course the Marine Corps would have issued this with a ACOG, a Trijicon ACOG optic here at the top. Flipping it to this side is basically the same fire selector here. Here's your bolt release, charging handle here at the top. Again, this is 1913 rail section. And adding into the interesting aspects of the collector series by FN, you do have the football style logo, which is different from their commercial logo. This is how they look when they're issued to the military. So very, very close representation of the original. Okay, again, glossing over the handguard of the G36. This is the full length, which would be the standard model G36. So they did have the G36E, which was the export version, which is the same length. You had the K, which was the Kurtz, which was the carbine, a little bit shorter on the handguard and the barrel. And then you had the C, or the Commando, which was your sort of PDW special operations type. But this is the standard length rifle used by the Bundeswehr. So there you go. The front of the carry handle / optic mounts right up here. This is not connected to the handguard. This is actually connected to the upper receiver section, if you will, which you could replace out with different type of optics, carry handle configurations, as I've showed you the one that actually came with it from Tommy Built. Moving back, you have your main receiver, which is this section here. The mag well and the pistol grip do remove from the firearm, which you do in disassembly, which I will show you. Charging handle is right up here at the top, and it is ambidextrous. Just like on the M16, you can really grab it from either handle, though you do have to depress the locking latch, which I'll show you at disassembly. But this can move over to this side. You can push it into lock, and you can charge from this side, or if you unlock it, you can switch it to the other side, push it into lock, and your charging handle on that side as well. It does reciprocate while you're firing, but as long as it's in the forward position, nothing's going to get in your way of your gear, your hands, or anything like that. It's reciprocating here underneath the carry handle. Now, as sold as a civilian version, it is a fire, safe, E for Einzelfeuer, single shot, safe, and fire, but these two settings, of course, only work in semi-automatic. Now, like many other HK products, trigger groups can be modular. They can be accommodated to fit any type of practical use. If you want a 2-round, a 3-round burst, fully automatic, if you want a combination thereof, you can put that trigger pack, trigger control group in there for whatever police department, military use you want. Totally modular. Again, I'll show you on disassembly. Now, the overall construction of all of these components is a very high impact polymer, which leads to the incredibly lightweight nature of the firearm. You do have a metal trunnion under here and the barrel. Pretty much, basically your bolt carrier group too, but basically everything else is polymer. Magazine release is a paddle here, and you do have the bolt does lock open on an empty magazine. Bolt release is actually here inside the trigger guard. There you go. Moving up to the top, the optic carry handle is a little interesting. So the way I have it set up here, this is the E, or the export model carry handle and optic. It is a 1.5 power with the ballistic drop compensator. They did also have this in a 3 power. The type used by the Bundeswehr was very similar to this, but then on top of this as well, they had an illuminated optic, which had a little solar panel on it on top, which you could open a little door to change the brightness settings on it, so you could use it for both extended ranges and close-in ranges. Now, that optic on the used market, whether you're getting it from hkparts.net or on eBay, is going to run you between about $1,000 to $1,500 for that setup alone. As compared to this, which basically gives you the overall similar look and feel, which will run you in new condition about $400, $450, or I actually got this one used for $200. So, and it's in excellent condition, so I was very happy to get that. The Tommy Built G36 is perfectly set up just like any other G36, and he calls it the T36, by the way. Perfectly set up to drop right in to your T36 if you get one from Tommy Built. So again, it comes with a standard rail, but if you find one $200, $300, $400, you can get this optic. It drops right in. Keep in mind, you will also need to buy an elongated front screw, because the ones that come with the gun it's too short on the front end if you're going to mount the optic. So when you buy one, get the elongated screw as well, or you won't be able to affix it at the front. Moving back into the stock, this is a typical G36 configuration stock. It does side fold, so you do not have to have it extended to fold that over. This is very tight. There's a locking latch here, and I'm doing this, of course, all upside down, but you do not have to have it extended in order to fire. Geez, there we go. Hinges over. Very easy to replace if you wanted to put, they actually make different lengths of stock. It does latch right in here into the top of the shell deflector, and it'll just pop in place like this. While it is in the closed position, it can be fired, so you will see the ejector port is exposed. Now for disassembly, which I'll do in a minute, you do see the back, this little kind of buffer housing here, which is locked in place, will not allow your internals to fly out of the back of the firearm. But again, I'll show you a little bit more about that in disassembly. Now in comparison, here is the back end of the M16A4 with sort of the A2 standard length buttstock. The sort of the difference on an M16 or an AR-15 or M4, any type of thing like that, is the buffer tube is essential to have in place, is it does have your buffer and buffer spring, and also room for your bolt carrier group to sort of reciprocate and recoil. So you cannot have any type of side folder, you know, for most intents and purposes for this to work. You do need that space at the back for the firearm to operate. So you cannot get side folders, under folders, anything like that. You can get collapsing stocks, which you guys see on M4 carbines, things like that, which you can put collapsing stocks on an M16. There's no problem. Actually, the Marine Corps started doing that to accommodate you know, people with shorter length of pulls, especially with their body armor and stuff on. So you will actually have seen those used. But anyway, the fixed A2 stock is customary for what you see on this platform. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the disassembly, starting here with the M16A4. It's very simple. You guys have probably seen this a million times, but you do have a takedown pin right here in the back of the receiver, which you can grab, start to pull. It is captive and held in place. That will allow the two receiver halves to pivot away from each other. You can remove the pivot pin up here at the front, although it's not necessary. Grab the charging handle, pull out, back, bolt comes out first, charging handle, and that is essentially a field strip. That is all you need to do. You can go further and take the bolt carrier apart, although that's not necessary. Mainly for the purposes of this video. Okay, field strip of the G36. Again, no tool is required, but there are a few more steps. So we're going to go ahead and remove our magazine and clear. First things first, there is a little push pin here, which you can pull and remove. There are provisions underneath the stock to stick your pins in, so if you are in the field, you do not lose them. With that out, the handguard can come right up off the front and off. Like I mentioned, this is all polymer. There's no heat shielding or anything in there. But as I mentioned, it is free floated, and you can see sort of a pencil profile barrel. Here is your short stroke gas piston assembly right here. If I can pull that open a little bit and push that short stroke gas piston, which I'm not going to disassemble. Okay, from there you can go ahead and pop this pin out of your mag well. Like that, pop that in there. Pull your magazine release, and that's forward and sort of hinges off. Now, Tommy Built does make a magazine well adapter for a Stanag, you know, AR-15 style magazine adapter, so you can get that and stick that in there. Go ahead and pop out. You have a pin here for your fire control group. Pop that out and stick that in there, and that will just come right off. Now, from there, again, you can switch this trigger pack out to different fire selectors, again, if this were a non-civilian G36. But anyway, we'll set that aside. And these are all basically polymer components. We're going to fold the stock out of the way, grab this buffer assembly sort of from the back and lift it out. Again, another polymer component. Pull that out. Here's your guide rod and buffer sort of in the back. And then from there, you can take your bolt carrier and bolt right out the back, and then you can sort of see at the top of the bolt carrier here is your charging handle, which had protruded through the top of the receiver. Well, that is all the time I have for you today on these. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button, and also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. I will leave you guys off with that. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.